The first time Matt saw Luke after the crash, he thought he was hallucinating. It had been a week since the accident. A drunk driver had taken the life of his older brother, his rock, his partner in crime, the photographer who never went anywhere without his camera. Matt was trying to lose himself in work when Luke appeared. "Hey, rookie," Luke had said, leaning against the desk like he wasn't half transparent, like he wasn't supposed to be 6 feet under. Matt froze, dropping his pen. His brother's plaid shirt and camera looked as real as ever, but his body shimmered faintly, like a glitching image. "You're dead," Matt stammered. Luke smirked. "You're observant. Always like that about you." It took weeks for Matt to stop questioning his sanity and months to figure out why Luke was still here. Luke's connection to the dead was unlike anything they'd ever heard of, a bridge between two worlds. He could talk to spirits, learn their secrets, see things Matt couldn't. And Matt could ask the living questions Luke never could. The brothers fell into a rhythm, investigating cold cases no one else could solve. Luke's insights, gathered from the dead, gave Matt leads he could never explain to his sources. Together, they became a team again, even if one of them was a ghost. Things got complicated when Kennedy came into Matt's life. She wasn't just his girlfriend. She was the first person who made Matt want something beyond the job. But every time she leaned in to kiss him, Luke was there, hovering awkwardly in the background. "You gonna tell her about me?" Luke asked one night as Kennedy left the room. "Why? So she thinks I'm crazy?" Matt replied. "She already thinks you're crazy," Luke joked, snapping a ghostly picture. The camera had been destroyed in the crash, but Luke carried it anyway, as if holding on to who he used to be. He never stopped taking photos, even though he admitted he couldn't develop them. Kennedy knew something was up. She had a way of narrowing her eyes at Matt when he hesitated, calling him Matthew in that sharp tone that made him flinch. And when she learned about Luke, she took to calling him Lucas, her voice softening just enough to make Matt jealous. It worked though. Luke liked her. And now, standing outside the derelict asylum, Matt wished Kennedy were here. Not because he needed her protection, but because Luke did. His brother had been quiet all day. The usual wisecracks replaced by an uneasy tension that crawled into Matt's skin. "You okay, Lucas?" Matt asked as he shouldered the gear back. Luke hovered by the broken gate, his face grim. "Not really." "Want to talk about it?" Luke glanced at the asylum's shattered windows. This place isn't like the others. They'd faced plenty of restless spirits and vengeful echoes of the dead. But Luke's unease was new. "What do you mean?" Matt asked. "I mean," Luke said, adjusting his phantom camera strap, "something's waiting for us in there. And it's not dead." Matt hesitated. "Then why go in?" "Because," Luke said, snapping a picture of the asylum, "we need to know what it is." And so, they stepped inside. The air inside the asylum clung to Matt's skin. Steps sent echoes ricocheting down the endless halls, though they were the only ones there. Physically, at least. Luke hovered just ahead, his translucent figure barely visible in the dim light. His camera strap shifted slightly as if he were adjusting it, though Matt knew it was all instinct. Muscle memory from a body that no longer existed. "Keep your head on straight," Luke muttered. "This place doesn't play by the rules." Matt swept his flashlight across the corridor. Rusted wheelchairs and overturned gurneys created jagged silhouettes in the gloom. And here I thought haunted hospitals were just a cliché. Luke didn't laugh. He paused at an intersection of hallways, tilting his head as if listening. "You hear something?" Matt asked, his voice low. "Not exactly." Luke's gaze remained fixed on the darkness ahead. "It's what I don't hear. No voices, no echoes, nothing." Matt frowned. That wasn't normal. Even in the most hostile locations, there was usually something. The faint hum of a restless spirit, the wail of a trapped soul. "Well, that's not ominous," Matt muttered. They turned left, moving deeper into the building. The oppressive silence weighed heavier with each step, broken only by the crunch of Matt's boots on debris. Then came the smell. It hit Matt like a physical blow. Sulfur and rot, so thick it burned his nostrils. He gagged, pulling his shirt up over his nose. "Luke, you smell that?" Luke glanced back, his face pale. "I don't need to. It's here." Matt froze, his flashlight beam shaking. "What's here?" Luke didn't answer. Instead, he raised his camera and snapped a picture of the darkness ahead. The sound of the shutter echoed eerily, far louder than it should have. Then the shadows moved. At first, Matt thought it was his light playing tricks on him. But the darkness at the end of the hall wasn't just shifting. It was growing, crawling. "Back up," Luke said, his voice tight. "What is that?" Matt whispered, his throat dry. "Not a ghost," Luke replied, stepping closer to Matt. "Move." Matt stumbled back, his heart pounding. The shadows surged forward, a mass of writhing black that swallowed the light from his flashlight. "Run!" Luke shouted, his voice more urgent than Matt had ever heard it. They bolted, Luke floating ahead of Matt as they retraced their steps. The shadows chased them, the sound of distorted whispers growing louder with every second. "Stairs!" Luke yelled, pointing to a crumbling stairwell on their right. Matt didn't hesitate. He threw himself into the stairwell, tripping over debris as he scrambled upward. The whispers followed, now a cacophony of guttural voices speaking in a language he couldn't understand. They burst onto the second floor, slamming into a heavy door. Matt leaned against it, gasping for breath. Luke hovered nearby, his eyes darting nervously. "That wasn't human," he said, finally breaking the silence. "No kidding," Matt panted. "What the hell was it?" Luke hesitated, gripping his camera strap. "I don't know, but it's old and it's angry." Matt felt a chill run down his spine. Luke never admitted he didn't know something. They stood there in silence for a moment, the muffled whispers fading behind the door. "Do we go back?" Matt asked, though he already knew the answer. Luke shook his head. "We don't have a choice." "Great," Matt muttered, pushing off the door. Just another day in paradise. But as they stepped into the next hallway, Matt noticed something odd. The air felt heavier, and the walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if the building itself were alive. "Matt," Luke said, his voice strained. Matt turned to look at his brother, and froze. Luke was flickering, his form fading in and out like a dying light bulb. "What's happening to you?" Matt asked, panic rising in his chest. "I don't know," Luke replied, his voice distorted. He clutched his camera, his knuckles ghost white. "It's pulling me." Before he could finish, Luke vanished. Matt was alone. "Luke." Matt's voice echoed down the empty hallway, swallowed by the oppressive silence. He whipped his flashlight around, desperate for any sign of his brother. Nothing. "Damn it, Luke, answer me." The air thickened, pressing on his chest like a vice. He staggered forward, every step heavier than the last. The flashlight flickered, its beam barely cutting through the encroaching shadows. And then he heard it, a low, guttural growl. Matt froze, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. The sound didn't belong to any human or animal he'd ever encountered. It came from everywhere and nowhere, reverberating in his skull. "Luke," he whispered, as if his brother could hear him. A sharp, metallic clatter echoed from the hallway to his left. Matt spun, his light landing on an open doorway. Beyond it, the room pulsed with a faint, fiery glow. "Of course," he muttered, steeling himself before stepping inside. The room was a chapel, or what was left of it. Rusted candelabras lined the walls, their waxy remnants twisted into grotesque shapes. At the center stood a stone altar, its surface scorched and cracked. The glow emanated from a circular sigil carved into the floor, its fiery edges licking at the air like living flames. Matt's gut twisted. Whatever had taken Luke, it was tied to this place. "All right, you bastard," he muttered, stepping closer. "What do you want?" The growl returned, louder this time. The sigil flared, and Matt felt the ground tremble beneath him. The voices came next, deep, guttural chants in a language that made his ears ache. Shadows danced along the walls, coalescing into twisted, humanoid shapes with eyes like burning coals. "Not spirits," he whispered. "Demons." The largest shadow stepped forward, its form towering and jagged, like a living nightmare. Its voice was a thunderous roar, shaking the room. "You trespass where you do not belong." Matt swallowed hard, raising the flashlight like it would do anything against the thing in front of him. "Where's my brother?" The demon laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Matt's spine. "The one bound to death? He is ours now." Rage bubbled in Matt's chest, cutting through the fear. "You're lying." The shadow tilted its head, almost amused. "He walks between worlds, and so he is claimed. But you!" It stepped closer, its burning gaze boring into him. "You have not yet crossed. Leave now, or share his fate." Matt gritted his teeth, refusing to back down. "Give him back." The flames in the sigil surged, and for a brief moment, Matt saw Luke. His brother stood at the edge of the glowing circle, his form flickering violently. He looked terrified. "Matt." Luke's voice cut through the chaos, desperate and raw. "Wake up. Wake up." Before Matt could process the words, the flames erupted, consuming the room in blinding light. Matt gasped, bolting upright. His breath came in short, ragged bursts, and his hands clawed at his chest. He wasn't in the asylum anymore. He was in his van, parked outside. For a moment, he thought it was all a nightmare, until he looked down. There, cradled in his trembling hands, was a camera. Not Luke's ghostly, intangible camera. The real camera, the one that had been destroyed in the crash. "No way," he whispered, turning it over. It was the same model, down to the scratches on the lens cap Luke used to complain about. He powered it on, and the screen flickered to life. The most recent photo sent a chill down his spine. A fiery sigil, glowing in the center of a dark chapel. "Look," he muttered, gripping the camera tightly. His brother was out there, somewhere in that infernal place. And now, Matt had a way to find him. But as he stared at the photo, the growl returned, soft, distant, and growing louder. Matt gripped the camera tightly, his breath fogging up the cold air inside the van. The image of the fiery sigil burned into his mind, and though he was no stranger to terror, this was different. Luke wasn't just missing, he was trapped in a place where Matt couldn't reach him. Or could he? The camera buzzed faintly in his hands, a vibration so soft it felt like a heartbeat. Matt turned it over, checking the screen again. The image of the sigil remained, but something was different now. An overlay of faint, glowing symbols like runes began to flicker across the display. What the hell? Matt muttered. As he tilted the camera, the runes shifted, almost like a compass pointing toward the asylum. "This is you, isn't it, Luke?" Matt whispered, clutching the device. It wasn't logical, but logic hadn't been part of his life since the day his dead brother showed up at his desk. He slammed the van door and grabbed his bag of gear, determination settling over his fear. The asylum waited, and so did Luke. The building felt even darker than before, the shadows heavier, as if they had multiplied in his absence. The silence pressed against Matt's ears like cotton, broken only by his own footsteps and the occasional creak of rotted wood. He raised the camera, its screen flickering with a faint glow. The runes brightened as he approached the main hallway. "Okay, Luke," he muttered. "Lead the way." The runes guided him, their light growing stronger as he moved deeper into the asylum. Matt's flashlight flickered and then died, but the camera screen stayed bright, illuminating his path. As he descended a staircase into the basement, the growling returned. It was faint at first, distant and low, but it grew louder with each step. Matt gritted his teeth, gripping the camera like a weapon. He reached the bottom of the stairs and found himself in a long corridor lined with heavy metal doors. The air reeked of sulfur, and the walls seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly light. The camera buzzed again, its screen displaying another image, the sigil, but this time with an open doorway at its center. Matt looked up and saw the same doorway at the end of the hall, its frame outlined in glowing red. "Almost there," he whispered, swallowing the lump in his throat. He pushed open the door and stepped into the chapel once more. The sigil still burned on the floor, its flames licking at the air, and in the center of the circle stood Luke. "Luke," Matt called out, rushing forward. His brother turned, his form flickering and weak. "Matthew, stop!" Luke shouted, his voice distorted, but it was too late. As Matt stepped onto the edge of the sigil, the flames roared to life, encircling him in a fiery barrier. The shadows that had chased him earlier surged forward, their coal-black eyes fixed on him. "You should not have returned," the demon's voice thundered. Matt clenched his fists. "Let him go. He belongs to us now, and soon you will too." "No," Luke interrupted, his voice steady despite his flickering form. He stepped toward Matt, holding his ghostly camera. "You don't get both of us." The flames around the sigil flared, and for a moment, Luke's form grew solid. He locked eyes with Matt. "Trust me, rookie." Before Matt could respond, Luke raised his camera and snapped a photo. The flash was blinding, flooding the room with light so bright it seared through the shadows. The demon screamed, its form writhing and twisting as the light consumed it. The flames around the sigil flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. When Matt opened his eyes, he was lying on the cold floor. The sigil was gone, and so was the fiery glow. "Look," he called, his voice echoing in the empty chapel. There was no response. The camera lay beside him, intact but silent. Matt picked it up and turned it over. The last photo on the screen showed the chapel empty, the sigil erased. Luke wasn't in the picture.